Hello everyone. Last time we have explained about the growth curves, that is S-shaped or J-shaped growth curves. Today we are going to discuss about population regulation. Population regulation means how the number of individuals in a population or how the population size is controlled or regulated in a nature, or how the population size or the number of individuals in a population are increasing or decreasing, or this can also be termed as the population dynamics. Means how the number of individuals in a population, they are increasing or decreasing, and how the number of individuals in a population is controlled in a nature. Mainly, there are two type of factors, that is abiotic factors and the biotic factors, which are solely responsible for the population dynamics or the population regulation. So, as far as the population regulation is concerned, the various factors, that is abiotic factors or the biotic factors, which are responsible for the regulation of the population size, this can be termed as, or this can be divided into two categories, such as density dependent regulation and density independent regulation. In short, we can say density means again the population size or the number of individuals, in a population, if are increasing or decreasing, that will affect positively or negatively with the increase in a number of individuals in a population or the decrease in number of individuals of a population. Means density, population density, or the number of individuals in a population itself is responsible for its control on its number or a population size. That is called as density dependent regulation. And density independent regulation, where usually the abiotic factors, that is physical environment or the habitat or a food supply. So these are the abiotic factors or the parameters of the environment which are affecting the population size or the number of individuals in a population. Now we'll explain the all these things uh, uh, in details. There are various factors. There are various factors, or there may be some mechanisms. There are various factors, or the mechanisms, or the activities which determines or which regulates the size or a number of its population. So there are various factors or the mechanisms which determines or which regulates the size or number of the population or the number of individuals of a population, and they are divided into two categories. First one is density dependent regulation and second is density independent regulation. Now we'll explain these two type of population regulations, that is density dependent and density independent regulation, one by one. So first we'll explain density dependent regulation. Density dependent factors Density dependent factors changes their action. Density dependent factors changes their action with the size or a density of a population. Means the number of individuals in a population or the population density itself is responsible for the changes of the density dependent factors. So density dependent factors get changed. Density dependent factors changing their action or their activities on the basis of the size of population or number of individuals in a population. And these are called as intrinsic factors. These are called as intrinsic factors. Their intensity increases. So whatever the density dependent factors or the intrinsic factors which are changing on the basis of change in population size or change in a number of individuals in a population, that is whether the number of individuals increasing or number of individuals decreasing in a population, that are affecting the changes in the intrinsic factors or the density dependent factors. So the density dependent factors intensity of density dependent factors increases with increase in population or decreases with a decrease in population. So the action of the intrinsic factors increasing, in short, or we can say the action of the dependent factors, the action of density dependent factors. I will repeat, the action of density dependent factors increasing with increase in a number of individuals or size of population, and the intensity or the action, intensity or the degree of action, the intensity of density dependent action or the degree of or the magnitude of density dependent factors decreasing with a decrease in a population, that is a decrease in a number of individuals in a population. Thus, density dependent factors are biotic. Thus, we can say density dependent factors are biotic factors. The density dependent factors are thus biotic, and they depend upon intra or interspecific coactions. The density dependent factors are biotic factors, and they depend upon intra or interspecific coactions. Means whatever the actions or the coactions performed by the organisms belonging to same species or the different species. So the actions or the co-actions of the organisms in a particular area or in a population, the actions or the co-actions of the interspecific or intraspecific organisms, intraspecific or interspecific organisms, they act or they shows their actions or co-actions, they shows their actions or the co-actions which are occurring between the interspecific or intraspecific organisms. Thus, density dependent factors are biotic, and they depend upon density dependent factors are biotic, and they depend upon the inter and intraspecific actions or co-actions. According to Austrian ecologist, according to Austrian ecologist A.J. Nicholson, according to Austrian ecologist A.J. Nicholson, populations are self-growing systems. Populations are self-governing systems. According to Austrian ecologist A.J. Nicholson, populations are self-governing, means they govern, they regulate. Populations are self-governing or self-regulating systems, and they regulate their densities, and they regulate or they control their number, and they regulate their densities or their number in relation to their own properties, in relation to their own properties, those of their environments. Density dependent factors are competition, predation, emigration, reproduction, and diseases. So these are the some of the factors which are density dependent factors. So When the population density or the number of individuals in a population or the size of population increasing, these density dependent factors also increasing. And when the population size or the number of individuals in population decreasing, these density dependent factors also decreasing, and they are competition, competition, predation. Competition means competition may be for various purposes. Competition between the organisms of the same species or the competition between the organisms of the different species. Competition. The competition may be for the habitat, maybe for the habitat, that is a living space, then food supply, maybe for the reproduction, maybe for oxygen. So there are several requirements or the factors which are essential for the growth of organisms, maybe plants or animals, but the competition will occur between the organisms of the same species or the different species when there is a maximum number of organisms present in a particular region or the particular habitat. So this is just a competition. So this is density dependent factor. When the population size increasing, ultimately the competition also increasing. The competition, if, for example, if the number of individuals or the population size increasing, there will be a competition either for food or for feeding or breeding. So these are the some of the requirements. So for these purposes, there may be a competition uh, increase among the individuals of the same species or the different species. Competition. So this is the density dependent factor, competition. Second one, that is predation. Predation, that is predator and prey relationship. If the prey number of prey is increasing, the number of predators also increasing. If the number of predators decreasing, if the number of predators decreasing, number of prey is increasing. So this is just a action or co-action. This is just a action or co-action with respect to a predation. So this will regulate the population size. Then emigration. So competition or the when the population size is more or maximum, where there is an increased number of individuals in a population, this can lead to competition. This can also lead to predation. This can lead into the emigration, means the outward movement. So some organisms, due to the competition, some organisms of the population can leave this particular place and go to certain other safety place so as to avoid overcrowding. Then reproduction. The rate of reproduction is also increasing or decreasing. The rate of reproduction is also increasing or decreasing with increase or decrease of the population size or the density, population size or the population density. So the reproduction and also the diseases. So there may be the infections of the different pathogens or the disease causing agents, may be epidemics or epizootics, and can cause the disease and ultimately result into the reduction or decrease in a number of individuals in a population, and thus reducing the population density. So diseases, this is density dependent factors. These are the density dependent factors which are affecting the population dynamics or the population regulation or the control. So density dependent factors are competition, predation, emigration, reproduction, diseases, etc. So we'll explain these density dependent factors one by one. First one, that is competition. Competition. The size of population is determined, the size, number of population, the size or number of individuals of a population is determined by the interactions between the members of same species or the different species. The size of the population is determined by the interactions between the members of same species or the different species, which can be competitors, competitors means the individuals of the population may belonging to same species or the different species, but they interact with one another and affecting, that is increasing or decreasing the size of population or the number of individuals of the population, and which can be competitors, predators, or the parasites, which can be competitors, predators, or the parasites. The competition directly causing mortality. The competition directly causing mortality, then nest or habitat destruction, and loss of food supplies. So these are the three adverse effects. These are the three kind of effects or the harmful effects or the adverse effects occurring in a population due to overcrowding or the competition or a overcrowding means when there is a maximum population size, when there is an increase in a population, or when there is increase in number of individuals may belonging to same species or different species, but the number of individuals in a population is maximum at that time, will lead into a overcrowding, and this will lead into a competition. The competition directly causing mortality. The competition results into mortality or excessive mortality or the death of the individuals. Then this also leads to habitat destruction or nest destruction, and thirdly, a loss of food supplies. Due to the increased number of organisms in a particular area, this will exhaust or finish the food quantity or the food supply in a shorter period of the time. So this will result into a competition. If there is a limited food supply in a region or in a habitat, so ultimately this will lead into a overpredation or overfeeding. This will lead into overfeeding, and this overfeeding will lead into loss of food supply. Then this shortage of the food supply will again increase the predation, that is predators will consume more number of organisms of other species or same species, and this will lead into a competition for the food. So ultimately will result into increased mortality. The number of individuals of smaller organisms or the herbivore organisms will increase due to their predation or the feeding by the larger animals or the carnivore animals. So this will lead into competitors, predations, and even parasites. So parasites can also attack the more number of individuals, that can also lead into diseases and will lead into the death of number of organisms from the population. So parasites will cause the diseases, and this can lead into the death of the organisms, may be due to the infectious diseases or the due to the parasitic infections, which can lead into a physiological stress. So the size of population is determined by interactions between the members of same species or different species, which can be competitors, predators, or the parasites. The competition directly causing mortality, nest or habitat destruction, and loss of food supplies. This leads to lowered rate of reproduction. So ultimately, when the population size is decreasing, when there is a lesser number or less number of organisms of the particular species, ultimately will lower the rate of reproduction. Will lower the rate of reproduction, then increased predation. This will lead into increased predation, that is, predators will predate or the feed upon the smaller organisms or the prey, increased predation, then increased dispersal or the spread into other regions, that is emigration, that is immigration, increased predation, increased dispersal or the spread of the organisms into other regions, and decreased health and the vigor, and decreased health and vigor due to the diseases. This might be due to a disease. Decreased health and vigor might be due to the shortage of the food, that is malnutrition, and also the diseases. Malnutrition and the diseases will lead into decreased health and the vigor among the members of the population. Intraspecific competition is one of the major driving force in the animals and plants by population dynamics. So intraspecific competition. Usually the competition will occur for the respective type of food, and this respective type of food can only be consumed by the organisms or the members of the same species, and that's why the chances of competition among the animals or the individuals of a population are more in case of organisms belonging to same species or intraspecific competition. So intraspecific competition is one of the major driving force. The intraspecific competition is one of the major driving force in animal and plant population dynamics. So the number of individuals, the number of plants and animals will increase. The number of plants and animals will increase or decrease due to the intraspecific competition, whether it will occur among the animals or between the plants. Then second is predation. Predation. The predator-prey relationship is also an example of density-dependent regulation. According to McCulloch in 1937, who explained the cyclic changes in a population density of wild cats means carnivore or the predators, and snowshoe hares which acts as a prey. So wildcats and the snowshoe hares, these are the two organisms which serves or acts as a predator and prey respectively. So McCulloch in 1937 has explained the cyclic changes in a population density of a wildcats like predators and snowshoe hares like prey, which indicates the positive correlation between the number of wild cats and the hares, which indicates the positive correlation between the number of wild cats and hares. Means when there is increase in number of hares, ultimately the number of wild cats will also increase. So this is positive correlation. If there is a decrease of hares, ultimately the number of wild cats will also decrease. So this is a positive correlation. This is a positive correlation between the predator like wildcat and prey like snowshoe hares. So this indicates the positive correlation, means when there is an increased number of prey organisms such as snowshoe hares, this will lead into this will lead to increased number of wild cats because of presence of adequate food in the form of prey organisms like snowshoe hares. So ultimately, the number of wild cats or the population size of the wild cats will increase because of availability or presence of plenty of food organism in the form of snowshoe hares. So, McCulloch explained the cyclic changes in population density of the wildcats, that is predators, and the snowshoe hares, which indicates the positive correlation between the wildcats and the hares. For example, the removal of mountain lions, for example, the removal of the removal of mountain lions representing the carnivores like wildcats or the predators like wildcats, that is, the removal of mountain lions was followed by great increase in a population of deers, indicating the density is regulated by their predators. Means if there are more number of lions, if the mountain lions, the number of mountain lions will increase in a particular area, ultimately that will predate upon the deers and the number of deers get decreased. Or if there are no lions in the vicinity, ultimately the number of deers will get increased. So the predators are responsible, the predators are thus responsible for the increase or decrease in a number of individuals or the population of the prey organism. So, predators also serves for the population dynamics or the population regulation, just like a competition. Then next type of density dependent factor, that is reproductivity. Reproductivity. It is also a density stabilizing factor. It is also a density stabilizing factor. The rate of births and deaths also plays a role in the regulation of the population size. Reproductivity or the reproduction rate of reproduction or breeding activities, or the breeding rate or the reproductivity or the rate of birth is also the density stabilizing factor. If the rate of birth is more, we will just explain the example. If the rate of birth is more than the rate of death, what will happen? Ultimately, the number of individuals in a population or in an area will get increased. And if there is a increased rate of death or the mortality, will result into decreased number of individuals in a population. So the rate of birth and uh, the rate of births and the rate of deaths will affect the population size. That is the reproductivity. Reproductivity. So the rate of natality and rate of mortality also playing role in the regulation of population size. So when in an area when there is increased birth rate and lower mortality rate or death rate, so ultimately the number of individuals in a population will get increased. And if the number of individuals get killed or dies more in number in a population than the birth rate, then ultimately the number or size of population will decrease. So, increase or decrease of individuals or the organisms in a population will be affected due to the increased or decreased birth rate and death rate. Then next density dependent factor, that is emigration. Emigration, that is the outward movement or the living off of the organisms of a population from the respective area or the habitat to other place. The pressure of overpopulation. So immigration occurs usually, the emigration, that is outward movement or the dispersal or the spread of organisms from the respective area, usually occurs due to overpopulation or the overcrowding. So the pressure of overpopulation, that is excessive number, the pressure of overpopulation or excessive number of individuals in a population can be relieved by the mass immigration. By the mass immigration means large number of individuals of the population from the particular place or particular locality will go out, certain other place. For example, immigration occurs when there is overcrowding in the migratory locust, lemmings or rodents, snowy owls, and snowshoe rabbits. So these are the some of the examples of the organisms which shows the emigration, that is mass immigration means large number of individuals or the organisms of the respective species will move to certain other place or migrate to certain other place, goes to certain other place, so as to avoid only the overpopulation of the species or overcrowding of the species. So immigration occurs when there is overcrowding in the migratory locust or lemmings or rodents or snowy owls and the snowshoe rabbits. So these are examples of the migratory organisms and which shows emigration whenever there is a overpopulation or the excessive number in a respective area and ultimately will lead into immigration. So this is the outward movement of the migratory organisms from the respective habitat so as to avoid overpopulation. So immigration can also uh, be responsible for the increase or decrease of the population size or the population regulation. Then fifth density dependent factor, that is diseases and physiological stress. Diseases and physiological stress. So the infectious diseases or there are variety of infections or the disease causing agents which are infecting variety of organisms or the plants and can lead into their mortality or can lead into their death. This reduces diseases and the physiological stress reduces the population size when or whenever there is epidemics or epizootics, means the infections of the disease causing agents or the parasites or the pathogens from the particular area or maybe from certain other place. So whenever there is a spread of disease, maybe epidemic or epizootics. So the diseases can be transmitted, diseases or the number of pathogens, various disease causing agents can be transmitted from the particular population or from the particular species or different species or maybe from certain other animals to the humans or the certain organisms and can lead into the infections or causing diseases among the population of the same species or the different species and can lead into the large a large number the death of large numbers or the causing the mortality. So infectious diseases are a common cause of the mortality and there are variety of organisms which are the infections or the causing infectious diseases. So the cause of disease or the pathogens transmission may be from different animals of the same species or the different species but can lead into the mortality or the death of large number of organisms. So mortality then falls the population below the level of stabilization and after a period follows recovery also. So this might be a temporary change in a number or in a population size. So diseases may be, so the diseases can be killed, the pathogens can be killed or removed from the population and ultimately there may be an increase of number of organisms after a certain period. After a certain period, the disease will be controlled among the population, and the rate of mortality is also reduced, and ultimately the population size will again increase back. So the diseases and physiological stress, that is infectious diseases, which are the common cause of mortality, which reduces the population size or the number of individuals in a particular area when there is a epidemic or epizootic occurs. Means whenever there is a infections or the a different type of diseases occurring in a particular species or the different species of the population and can lead into the mortality. So there may be a death of organisms, excessive number of organisms get killed or died of due to the infectious diseases, and this will lead into the reduction or a decrease in a number of individuals in a population below the level of stabilization, and after a certain period follows the recovery also. Then physiological stress also brings considerable mortality and reducing the population. Physiological stress means the reasons for the physiological stress might be certain diseases may be caused due to the infections, or may be due to some adverse physiological conditions or the physiological diseases or the physiological stress in the respective organism. So the diseases, the infectious diseases or the physiological stress in the organism can lead into the number of death of number of organisms. Physiological stress and the infectious diseases can lead into the considerable mortality and reducing or decreasing the number of individuals in a population. So these are the five different factors, density dependent factors, which are mainly responsible for the population regulation, that is competition, predation, reproductivity, emigration, and diseases and the physiological stress. So these are the five type of density dependent factors, and which are mainly the biotic factors. So these biotic factors, these five type of density dependent factors are density dependent factors. So whenever there is increase or decrease in a number or a size of population, these five type of density dependent factors changing their activities. These five type of activities, they get changed due to the change in a number of individuals in a population. So population density, these are and thus are called as the density dependent factors. So whenever there is increase or decrease in a population density, these five factors or these five parameters of the density are affected or they are changing. Then second type of uh, uh, density independent factors, the second type of factors which are also responsible for the population regulation, or which are also responsible for the population dynamics. So density independent factors, and these are mainly abiotic factors. As we have explained earlier, that there are two type of factors, that is biotic factors and the abiotic factors. So biotic factors are the density dependent factors. Biotic factors are the density dependent factors, and which are affected or getting changed time to time as per the population size is changing. As the population size is changing, the density dependent factors or the biotic factors are also changing or affected, and there is a sort of a regulation in a population size due to the activities, that is actions or the co-actions of the different biotic factors or density dependent factors. And density independent factors or density independent regulation comprises the abiotic factors, contains or composed of abiotic factors. So density independent regulation is mainly caused due to the abiotic factors such as the space or cover, weather, food supply, or toxic pollution, or magnitude of these factors, abiotic factors, can determine the population size. So the level of stable populations is determined by the factors such as space space or cover, secondly weather, then food supply and toxic pollution. So these are the some of the factors which are related with the physical environment or the surrounding environment or the habitat of the respective population or the different organisms. So magnitude of these factors is determined by physical or abiotic conditions. Magnitude of these factors is determined by the physical or abiotic conditions of the environment. The maximum population size, the maximum population size in plants could be determined in plants could be determined by the physical environment. The magnitude of these factors is determined by the physical or abiotic conditions of the environment, and the maximum population size in plants could be determined the maximum population size in plants could be determined by the physical environment. For example, small insects living in a arid condition or in the atmosphere, their population increases in a short wet season, in shorter period of the wet season or the rainy season until the drought kills the plants, until the drought kills the plants on which they feed. Means the small insects which are occurring, the small insects which are occurring in the atmosphere, the number of these small insects which are occurring in the atmosphere, the number of which will increase during the monsoon month or during the wet season until the drought kills the plants on which they feed. Means during the drought period or the summer months, whenever in the respective habitat there is a loss of water or there is a drought condition, due to which what will happen, the plant community will get destroyed. The plant community will get destroyed on which these insects are feeding. Means these insects or these small insects which are dependent upon the plant material for their food. So whenever there is a scarcity of the food, or whenever there is a shortage of the food, ultimately the number of insects, the number or the individuals of these insect species get decreased. Ultimately, so this is a quite obvious that the number of small insects which are occurring in the atmosphere and get established or flourished, means increasing their population during only the rainy season or the wet season, and after the exhaust or the destruction of the food supply completely, that is whenever there is a drought conditions, this will result into the destruction of the food plants, and ultimately the insect population will get decreased. So then this sect appears. So small insects. So example of the density independent regulation, that is the abiotic factors, that is space or habitat loss or the cover, then food loss, habitat loss. So these are the some of the important environmental or abiotic factors or the physical factors which are responsible for the population regulation. And the example is the small insects which are occurring in the or get developed in the atmosphere when with a increased population size in the rainy season or the wet season until the drought kills the plants on which they feed, and then insects disappear. So insects mainly disappear, or the number of insect population or the insect population will decrease in a drought conditions or increase during the wet conditions. So this is depending upon the availability of the food in the particular locality. In the particular location, when there is a large quantity of plants available or developed during the wet season or the rainy season, ultimately this will lead into increased insect population. So this is the density independent regulation. Density independent regulation. So food supply, that is plants, are responsible for the population regulation. If there is availability of the large quantity of the food plant or the food organism in the surrounding, ultimately the population size will increase. Ultimately, the population size of the respective species like small insects will increase, and if there is a loss of food or the destruction of the food during the drought conditions or the drought period, ultimately the population of these insects or whatever the species which is depending upon the respective type of food will get decreased. So this is the density independent regulation. Thus their population depends on the food supply. Thus the their population means insect population, small insect population depends upon the food supply, that is the plants which are available only in the rainy season or the wet season, but during the summer month or the drought conditions the plants get killed or destroyed, ultimately losing or causing the loss of the food, and ultimately the number of insects or the population size of the insects will get decreased. According to Wynne-Edwards in 1962, most animals keep their population below the level of starvation. According to the Wynne-Edwards, so this is again a ecologist who explained that most animals or the most animal species keep their population below the level of starvation, below the level of their starvation, and they regulate their numbers, to avoid overeating or destroying the food supply in two ways. Means they these species, there are some species of the organisms, they themselves control the population so as to avoid the starvation by two ways, that is by avoiding overeating or destroying the food supply in a two ways, and these two ways are: one, that is territorial behavior and peck orders. Territorial behavior and the peck orders means serve to parcel out the available food to the stronger members. Territorial behavior means when there is a limited food supply, whenever there is a limited food supply, what happens in the particular species? Only stronger organisms are allowed to feed on the limited food supply, and the weak organisms which are weak, which are not usually capable of reproduction, that are kept away from feeding. Only the strong vigors or only the strong organisms or the animals of the respective species are fed onto the limited food supply, and which are only allowed to breed or reproduce. Means this is again a sort of control, a type of control on the population size. So, and this is because of a limited food supply. Whenever there is a limited food supply, some species or some organisms, they themselves control their population by two ways. They control their population or maintain their number with a stable level, so as to maintain the stable level of population. they avoid overeating, and this overeating of the limited food stock or the food supply will be prevented by two ways, that is territorial behavior. Territorial behavior means there is a sort of isolation or the segregation of the organisms, maybe the strong animals and the weak animals of the population. So only the strong animals are allowed to feed, or they are fed onto the limited food stock, and rest of the weak population can be driven out from the particular population or may be prevented uh, from the eating the food, and only the strong animals or the vigors of the strong animals or the organisms, they are allowed to feed and allowed to breed, and this is only for the propagation. This may be for the retention or the preservation or the conservation of the species or the propagation of the species with protection or with a feeding, proper feeding of the limited number of organisms, so as to sustain the species, so as to propagate the species, so as to save the species, called as territorial behavior and the peak orders. So in this case, the limited food supply is fed, or the limited food stock is fed to the limited number of organisms, to the limited number of organisms, and which are allowed to breed or which are allowed to reproduce, and the rest of the population which is weak, that will kept away, or that will not be allowed to feed onto the limited stock of the food because of their incapability of the reproduction. That might be due to their uh, uh, lesser efficiency or the capacity of the reproduction, which are the kept away. So the most of the animals, according to Wayne Edwards in 1962, most animals keep their population below the level of starvation. They regulate their numbers to avoid overeating or destroying the food supply in two ways. One, that is territorial behavior, and second is the peck orders. It means they serve to parcel out. They serve peck orders and territorial behavior. Territorial behavior, and peck orders serve to parcel out the available food to the stronger members, so that they could survive and breed, so that they can survive and breed, whereas the rest of means weak organisms, whereas the rest are excluded from the breeding, and thus the production of offspring, and thus the production of the offsprings is adjusted to the food supply. Thus, the production of the offspring is adjusted to the food supply, means whatever the quantity of the food available, and will be provided to the limited number or a definite number of organisms, and on that basis the reproductive activity is controlled, and the level or the number of individuals or the population is kept below the level of starvation. Means so as to avoid the starvation, and so as to prevent the loss of organisms uh, of the species or the entire population, so as to avoid the entire loss of the population, the limited number of organisms are allowed to feed and allowed to reproduce, and the limited number of offsprings are produced so as to avoid the starvation, and this is because of a limited or restricted quantity of the food supply. So this is what about the population regulation, and we have explained two type of population regulation, that is density dependent regulation and density independent regulation. So in density dependent regulation, we have explained five type of biotic factors which are getting changed on the basis of increased or decreased number of the individuals of the population, and they are competition, predation, reproductivity, emigration, and fifth is diseases and the physiological stress. So these are the different actions or the co-actions or the activities of the biotic factors which are depending upon or getting changed time to time as per the size of population, as per the population size or the population number or the population density, and the population density if increasing or decreasing, this is affecting these biotic factors. So these biotic factors are the density dependent factors, and the regulation of the population is called as density dependent regulation. And second type, that is density independent regulation, where the habitat, that is respect to habitat or the space or the living space, then habitat or the food supply, these are the physical factors or the abiotic factors and are responsible for the population regulation, that is control, that is decrease or increase in a number of individuals or the population density is caused by depending upon the density independent regulation. This particular type of regulation is called as density independent regulation. So today we'll stop here. Next time we'll explain the next topic. Thank you.